Misfits, people ask me all the time about tools that I use in my life and business to maximize my success. I usually start by telling them one of my most powerful tools is my morning habits. And of course, they look at me somewhat confused. I then explain how important it is for me to center myself and how I begin my day and plan for my success. It's critical to consistent high performance. And it doesn't take me long, about 5 or 10 minutes, because I use a great resource called the 5-Minute Journal. The 5-Minute Journal is the simplest, most effective way I've ever found to start your day in the right mindset, doing the right things, and set yourself up for success. And it is exactly what it says, a 5-minute exercise you can do each day. Let me ask you, if you could reach your next level in your life and business by spending just 5 minutes of focused time a day, would you do it? I bet you would. And I know it works because I've experienced the power of it. And you can get your 5-minute journal simply by going to www.misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/journal. Do what I do. Use this amazing resource to give yourself an edge in your performance and your success. Get your 5-minute journal today.
Hello, Misfit Entrepreneurs. This is Dave Lukas, and welcome to another episode of the Misfit Entrepreneur, where it is our job to help you unleash your inner misfit and break through to higher levels of success, wealth, and fulfillment by bringing you the best insight and information from the world's top entrepreneurs, with a specific focus on their misfit side, the specific traits, habits, and secrets that have allowed them to thrive and succeed. As a reminder, if you're new to watching us on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button below. Give this video a like and comment as well. We do our best to respond to all comments as timely as possible. This week's Misfit Entrepreneur is Dave Rosenberg. If you have ever wanted to know what it means to be radically accountable, Dave is the guy to learn from. He's a former F-14 naval officer, think Top Gun, who founded Locked On Leadership, a premier leadership development firm that has worked with hundreds of organizations, helping them to learn what it means to lead and build high-performing teams. And if that's not enough, he's also a multiple black belt across several different martial art disciplines. One thing that really caught my attention with Dave was that during his time in the military, he had a lot of leadership roles, but in one role, he spent over 100 days leading a team of sailors during preparations for Desert Storm. And as he says, that was one of the most intense leadership experiences of my life. Morale was a constant challenge, and I quickly learned that motivation wears off, but inspiration lasts. The right words at the right time made all the difference in keeping my team focused, engaged, and mission ready. It was really this quote that really piqued my interest to have him on the show and dig into everything he learned about how to be radically accountable and be a great leader. So let's jump in. Dave, are you ready to unleash your inner misfit?
Well, my inner misfit's been out for 63 years now, so yeah.
Well, hey, it's a pleasure to have you on, and you've had, quite a career, done a lot of things. And so maybe we start there. Take 5 minutes or so and just tell us, how'd you get to where you're at?
Well, it is a journey. So I guess it probably starts in college. And I'm not going to bore you with all my college years. I just start with that that freshman year, probably the best 3 years of my life. And I say that joking, but I was a screw up. I went to college and didn't know what I wanted to do or why I wanted to do it. I chose engineering because I was good at math, but I had no idea what an engineer did. And so, like a lot, I lost my way. Well, actually, and we could talk about this later, I think, but didn't really lose my way, but I had to learn some lessons. Life, let's put it that way. Life gave me lessons to learn, and it took me 3 years to learn them. And fast forward, I'm getting ready to graduate, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And a buddy of mine and I were talking because, frankly, I wanted to be an astronaut. And not just as a 6-year-old kid, or I think 7-year-old kid, whatever it was when Neil Armstrong first landed, but as a young adult graduating college. And he said, join the Navy, go to naval aviation. That's the best way to do it. And I wore glasses and I said, well, I can't fly. And he said, no, there's this thing called a naval flight officer. And as you alluded to in the intro, there are a lot of different roles they do, but the one people are most famous know about it is Goose in Top Gun, the backseat of the F-14. So I applied and got accepted, went to officer candidate school, and then through flight training, lo and behold, I actually got selected to fly in the F-14, which was just an amazing, I'll never forget that day. Floating over the ground as I walked up to, graduated from intermediate flight training. So I ended up, deploying. I did a Desert Shield deployment. So as you talked about as well, we'll probably dig into that. But 111-day flying period as we're getting ready. We're protecting U.S. assets as they're being flown into Saudi Arabia, getting ready for Desert Storm. Get out of the Navy after that, and I end up in sales. And I became a sales manager, and I remember thinking, God, how am I supposed to train new salespeople? There was no manual. There was no nothing. And my career at this point was military, where there's a manual for everything. How do you fold your skivvies and put them in the drawer? Look to the manual. It exists. So I wrote a manual, and that began really what became a hallmark of my career. So I had success at that company. I moved to another company. We got promoted to VP of operations. Same thing, no manual. So I wrote a manual, used that to train people. Then I started my own business. Even when it was just me, created a manual because I knew I was going to hire people. So as I figured out how to do things, what my processes and procedures were, created a manual. It did two things for me, and I want to spend a lot of time, but one, when I was doing things infrequently, it was easier the second time. I didn't have to reinvent the wheel, but I was doing it so that when I brought somebody on, they would know how to do it. I'd already figured it out. And, sold that business and then ended up running several other companies as president. And the last company I ran that I thought was going to be my last job was a moving company here in San Diego, a good-sized moving company. And when the owner sold, I was looking for work again. One of my vendors who was a friend as well. So we've probably all had that where good vendors become friends. And he asked me to go to work for him. He was an IT support company. And I remember saying, you can't afford me. This was a $500,000 company. They were, I'm going to take a 20% or more of their revenue. That's just not going to happen. And he said, can you at least consult? Help me and my wife. We've been stuck for 10 years, 10-year-old company, but for 5 years, we've been stuck at this level. We can't grow it. And I thought, why not? While I'm looking for work, let me do this. Well, as I started working with him and I started thinking about my next step, and I'm north of 50 at this point, I'm thinking, it's going to take 6 months to a year to find the right opportunity. And then the daughter, the son is going to come in, take over. They'll sell the business like just happened to me. Something's going to happen. And 5 years from now, as I'm approaching 60, I'm going to be back here again. And I don't see retirement in my future ever. That just sounds boring to me. So I thought, let me just bet on myself. And so again, this is now my third business. So I didn't even talk about my first one right out of the Navy. And so I started coaching small businesses. And as I was doing that, what I realized very quickly is that there's some really talented, what I call technicians. I don't care what the industry is, the person who did the job, who now started his own business doing the job. And not one of them knew how to run a business. And the real problem was leadership. And so that started my journey to where I am today. I started putting my leadership thoughts down on paper. Again, I wrote the manual. There's an overarching theme here. And radical accountability was born of that, which is really my methodology based on, 30 years plus experience in various leadership roles of how to inspire people to do what they were supposed to do when they're supposed to do it with accuracy.
So let's break that down. Let's go into the manual, if you will, right? So let's start at the top. Like first, let's define it. What is radical accountability? And really, how does it differ from like what people traditionally think accountability is?
Yeah, great question. So most people, when you talk about accountability, they think about holding people accountable. In other words, accountability is saying, what did I do wrong? Or somebody who's self-accountable saying, this was my fault, here's where I screwed up. And that is an aspect of accountability. But let's break the word down itself. It's the ability to account for yourself, right? Accountability. An account actually comes from the Latin word computare, to compute, to add, right? And so when we do math, when we do that, what we're really doing is following a process and procedure. So accountability, in my definition, and most people conflate accountability and responsibility, right? And then responsibility is our ability to respond. Accountability is our ability to account. So when we can recount the steps we took to get to a result, whether good or bad, we are being accountable. So a culture of accountability where everybody follows the correct procedures and can account for themselves. In other words, they can say, yes, this is what I did and this is how I did it, and this was the result, is what I call one of radical accountability, where everybody is doing it. We've all worked with those other individuals who go, no, it wasn't me. The other dude did it. Not my fault. It was the sun was in my eye. And they have all these external excuses for why things didn't work out. Even if those external excuses were actually present, those reasons were present, there is always something that we could have done different, right? How we react to the environment, how we react to what happens to us, that's what we control. And so if we don't learn from that, then it's going to happen again. So radical accountability is that culture where we actually do it. We do what we're supposed to do when we're supposed to do it. And then when it doesn't work out, we learn what we can do different so the next time it does. That's radical accountability in a nutshell.
Okay. And so like my first thought, like after hearing that is, you've worked with hundreds of organizations at this point, working with this philosophy, teaching this. I know there's a lot of things underneath that. That's part of the manual, if you will. But like, what's the most common, accountability problem that you see across business today? Like, is there something that's consistent that you see the most that you really help leaders fix? And I guess, what is that? How do you fix it?
Sure. And really it breaks down to what the three elements that must be present to create radical accountability. So I wouldn't say there's any one, but it's one of these three, or at least one of these three, if not all of these three being missing. And the first is mechanics. So the mechanics are, well, we've already sort of alluded to that. Those are the processes, policies, procedures, metrics, training, all the things that we do as a business to set our people up for success. Then the more defined it is, and I believe everything from how you open the door in the morning to how you lock it up at night and everything that happens in between needs to have a process in place or a procedure in place that's written, documented, so everyone knows exactly what's expected of them. And then we need to train on that and tell people how much of it we need to do. And it's not about control. It's about setting people up for success. When you do that, so imagine you go to work for a company for the first time, and even if it's an industry you've been in your whole career, they're going to do things differently than your past companies, right? It's just the way it works. So what is your way to do it? When we're setting people up for success, I would hire movers, and we had a specific way of wrapping furniture so it was better protected. If you've ever hired a professional mover to move you, what you'll notice is that most of the damage is done at the very base of your furniture. Because what typically they do is they just drape the moving blankets over the furniture, and there's this much showing, and that's where everything gets bumped. We would wrap ours, we called it a 360 by 3 wrapping, where it was completely encased in moving blankets to prevent that. Well, I had experienced movers come to work for me, and they would start to do what I call parachute drape, the first way, and they say, no, this is faster. We get the move done quicker. I said, that's not the way we do it. And so when you train people, they don't do it their way. They do it your way. And they know how to do it your way because they've been trained. and there's a policy and procedure in place to do that. And they know they can achieve the quantity that you require, the metrics, because you've tested them to that metric. Oh, you now get to go on the floor because you can produce X amount. Right? So we've set people up for success because they have the knowledge to do it. And later on, if there's an issue, you now have a tool by which to say, did you follow these processes and procedures? And if you did, there's a procedural breakdown, i.e. something's missing that we can now fix and iterate to make it better, get a higher quality product. So that's number one, is mechanics. So probably, depending on the size of the company, larger companies will have the mechanics generally in place. You know, when I wrote my book, I interviewed some executives at Zappos, for example. You know, they have massive training in place. It's all there. Smaller companies, they tend to skimp on that. Right? So depending on the size of the company, there's that. So that's number one. Number two, and this is probably across the board the most common missing piece, and that's mindset. Why do you exist as an organization? Right? So, I mean, Dave, you run some businesses, right? What's one of the businesses you run?
Well, I've got several, but let's just use, I've built a number of software companies over the years and still continue to do that. And I'm running one right now. So
In what industry?
Actually in the tax and accounting industry.
Okay. So why does that company exist?
It exists to serve the end user is the taxpayer, but we serve them through our accountants, and we provide kind of a win-win-win. We do tax planning services and automate that whole process. So it saves the client, the end user, the taxpayer, money on their taxes, and at the same time creates a new revenue stream for the CPA firm.
So now we have some value to the outside world, right? The CPA could do that on his own, right? Probably everything that you provide for them, they could do with pencil and paper and an abacus or whatever, right? Everything you do, they could, but now they're able to do it faster. They're able to do it more efficiently and probably more accurately. Okay.
Correct.
And because of that, there's a value to them that is worth more to them than whatever you charge for that service. Time and time again. And for all of us providing services, every single one of us in the world who sells something, the value to us is less than the value it is to the person who's buying it, right? And the value to the person who's buying it is greater than the amount they're paying. That's why they're paying it. Right? So mindset is, why do we exist? Right? And I love what you said, because not only is it by extension the tax accountant who's using your service, because now they get to do their job, but by extension, the actual individual, and I'm assuming or business, who is filing those taxes has a peace of mind that they are not going to get swooped down upon by the IRS because they made some error. There's more accuracy. Right. This is such a huge headache. We all know, you know, even EAs and tax accountants, you know, they make mistakes, right? So this minimizes all of that. So you're serving this really big purpose out there, which is peace of mind, so people can plan properly and say, okay, if you're a business, X amount of dollars I need to set aside for my taxes every year. And if you're an individual, I'm ahead of it, I'm behind it, here's how I'm going to deal with it, etc. So all businesses have this purpose. So number one is, what's the purpose of the business? Because we want to hire people who get excited by that.
Right.
If I'm hiring people who don't care about my purpose, they're going to just go through the motions. And I don't want people going through the motions. I want people who are excited, because they're the ones who are going to look to help improve, who are going to stop problems before they arise or before they become really big, right? So mindset's really critical. The other piece of mindset is understanding how what I do affects other stakeholders.
Right.
How does that affect my coworkers? How does that affect my clients? How does that affect my vendors? When we think about other people, we tend to be more accountable. And I think you and I talked, a week or so ago. Think about people who have received any medal of valor, say a Silver Star, Bronze Star, Medal of Honor. When read the interviews with them, or if you spoke to them personally, to a person, they'll tell you the same thing. I didn't do anything anybody else in my shoes who happened to be standing where I was standing wouldn't have done under those conditions. And if I didn't do them, my brothers and sisters in arms would have been hurt, harmed, killed, whatever. We step up when other people are at stake. It's in our DNA. It's part of being a social pack animal as human beings. That is the piece that no leaders I know of, except for the very best, talk about on a regular basis. So that's
those are great points. There's a few things too with this that really, it for all small businesses, and you're hitting on, the two major challenges that most have to, it's like a rite of passage. If you want to grow to the next level and stuff, you have to go through these, and each level has its own set of these things. But like, first off, obviously, like the documentation of your processes and everything, really it's your systems and your, processes that really define how your business can grow and can scale. If they aren't clearly defined, they aren't easily followable, you don't have a way to track them, you don't have a way to be accountable to them, then you can't, you're not going to be able to grow because you can't duplicate, right? But if you have that right, you can duplicate and you can continue to grow. You can add more people in and go from there. That second part, though, about understanding the purpose of the business and where you fit into that purpose and how what you do every day impacts that purpose and makes a bigger difference. That's, again, that's a leadership thing that has to be communicated. We spend a lot of time on that in our world because, talking about the software company, we love the fact that everybody wins in our world. Right. So, every action we make, everything we do, every new tax strategy we vet and put in, we know that we are adding to the benefits to everybody along the chain. Like, we've saved well over $1 billion for taxpayers. How many kids have we put through college? How many people have been able to retire 5 years earlier and have a better quality of life, and so on. So it's much more than just providing a service. There's a true impact that cascades that you really need to understand it and share throughout your organization. So like, that is really, really important. The other thing like that I think about with this is like, I think a lot of business owners are sitting here, they're listening to this conversation like, I get it. But it's the things that we know we need to do, right? That we don't necessarily have time for, the little things like we know we need to do them, but I just don't want to, like, stuff, right? That are the most important to do. And there are actually frameworks and systems that you can actually get to help you do this well. Like, I've implemented EOS at a number of businesses. I like the Entrepreneur Operating System. It's a good one. There's several of them out there, but the EOS is probably the most tried and true, and it's used by over 500,000 businesses. It's a little bit cookie cutter, right? So you have to kind of adapt it to your own culture and stuff, but it does give a great framework for how to run a business, how to systematize things, how to get your goals down on paper, and, what your principles and your values are for the company, and what you're going to say to the market about yourself, and all of that stuff, so that everybody in the organization knows what that is. And so I would urge anybody that is kind of hearing this and thinking about those things, investigate some of those things out there, because you don't have to go it alone or reinvent the wheel. It's already actually been invented in a lot of ways. So it's a great point. I actually want to take just a 1 minute break here. When I come back, I want to talk to you more about this topic and a few others around leadership and your own entrepreneur career. So we'll do that. We'll be right back.
Misfit Entrepreneurs, I want to tell you about an amazing resource that will have tremendous impact on your business and your revenue. I have used this solution in multiple businesses, and it has made an incredible difference. Let me start by asking you something. Do you know how much it costs your business when just one salesperson doesn't step up to deliver? Do you really know? The cost can easily exceed 6 figures for just one bad hire, not just from the time, effort, and resources in hiring them, but from the lost business and downtime as well, as you have to go find a new salesperson and everything surrounding that. And the last thing any growing business can afford is to have a failed hire, especially in sales, the revenue driver for the company. But what if there was a way to know someone checked all the boxes of a great sales hunter and closer before you ever hired them? That's the solution that I found from a company called Sales Drive. They have created a solution called Drive Test. It's a powerful hiring tool that separates high-performance salespeople from pretenders by measuring the most critical personality trait needed for success in sales: drive. Drive is composed of 3 non-teachable traits shared by all top producers: the need for achievement, competitiveness, and optimism. And knowing who has drive before the interview dramatically increases your chances of selecting salespeople who will produce for you while avoiding those costly bad hires. I've used the solution and it works. In fact, it works so well, I've referred them to every company that I work with. And they've created a very special offer so that you can try them for free as well. You can get a free drive test assessment today at www.misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive. That's misfitentrepreneur.com/sales drive, all one word. Start using the drive test in your hiring and never hire a bad salesperson again.
All right. Dave, we talked, the last thing was really great because it really got to the heart of the matter, right? Of things. And if you do really, if you really take the time to put the processes in place, and document things and the step-by-step stuff that you need to do, and then have a structure that can ensure that it's being followed, you are so much further than a lot of businesses. And at the same time, if people understand the purpose of that and what following those does in a bigger way, then you're really far along, right? The question people may have, or somebody watching may have, is, okay, I get it, but man, I've been pretty lenient with my accountability to this point. And now I want to turn it on, right? And, do that. How do they do that maybe without, causing a mutiny internally? How do they start to institute these things so that they're, get the buy-in, do all the things they need to do? I mean, I have my ways of doing that, but I'd love to hear how you share how to do that.
Absolutely. And I actually get this from clients frequently, right? Because when they engage me, they're in that position you just described. And it really comes down to, which is also the third element, which is model. Right? In other words, we have to model the behavior as leaders. We must model the behaviors we want to see from others because they're going to emulate us. They're going to do as I do, not as I say. And so to be accountable, we have to own our mistakes. So in this case, if I had not been holding people accountable, and most people don't because of the mindset piece, and we could explore that if you want in a minute, but we need to first own that, right? So what I would do is I would go to my team, go to my company, depending on the size of the company, how I do this, that's a different conversation, and say, listen, I've been failing you. We've been allowing this slippage to occur. We've been allowing these problems to go unaddressed. And it's holding us back. And by holding us back, we're holding you back because your career opportunities aren't there. The growth of the company is slowed, and that's hurting you, right? So now I'm talking about how this is affecting others, right? Mindset. I'm starting to now demonstrate. I'm thinking about you, right? And frankly, when we fail to hold people accountable, we're sending a subliminal message that we don't think they're capable. And that's really important thing to understand. So when you own that to the company and say, so we are going to start changing that. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to, start towing the line on this stuff. Maybe there's a grace period of where you'll have a discussion before we have some higher level, consequence. You want to make sure people understand that this is serious and it's going to happen, but understand it. There's an institutional momentum that you have to turn around, right? So we need to be sensitive to that. At the same time, we have to do it, right? So we have that conversation. We tell people to expect this change, right? Because it's about setting people up for success. And then when they start slipping, because they will, because it's habit, we say, listen, we're in that grace period now, but starting next month or whatever that time frame is, if this happens again, here's what the result is going to be. Now, what I'll tell you is you're going to have to enforce that. You're going to have to somebody, and it's more than likely going to be the worst person in the world you want to see that happen to. And you're going to have to hold them accountable to whatever that might be. And when you do that, everyone will realize this is true. There's a story, I think it was James O'Neill, the former Secretary of the Treasury who ran Alcoa many years ago. I think it was James was his first name. I can't remember. But when he took over Alcoa, he talked about safety. we're going to have a culture of safety. And he came out with a policy. He said, any safety incident anywhere in the company gets reported directly to me as CEO. 24 hours. That's it. And there was a minor incident in one of his factories, a very well-run factory. The president of the factory was one of his top people. The guy didn't think it was that important. It was a small incident, didn't report it. He got fired. And all of a sudden the message was, this is serious. And that changed the direction of Alcoa for the better. You're going to have to do something like that. It's going to come.
Yeah. And, another thing, kind of an offshoot to that, because there are two sides of the coin. It's kind of a rule that I've lived by in leading organizations for years. And I think it if you couple it with, like, what you're talking about is not just radical accountability, but radical responsibility on the business owner standpoint too, right? And taking responsibility for it, but then holding people to that. Like, well, it's two of my rules, right? One is that people live up to the standards that you set for them. And the other is that people support what they help to create, right? So if you allow them to be part of that process, like, okay, look, guys, this is partly my fault, right? We haven't been succeeding at the level that we could. And you know what? It's time that we can do that. And that translates to much more for all of us if we do this well. So here's what we got to do, right? Now, for your area, how do you think you could help us achieve that? Like, if you start bringing people in, right, and they help to do that, it makes it much easier to hold them accountable because it's their idea for it, right? And then if you say, that's great, like, and you set that expectation for it and you agree, hey, we're going to do this together. We're going to hit that. And that set the expectation. It makes it a lot easier, right? Versus like, it's the carrot and the stick, right? The stick is needed sometimes, but if you always bring out the stick, that's all you got, right? That doesn't necessarily help you. And so I think, hearing you say that, it's kind of those two sides of the coin done well, really can make a difference. And I love that. I got one more question on leadership because I want to talk about a couple other things that, like, some quotes you said and stuff that really piqued my interest, but, and it may be something we've already discussed, but what would you say is like the biggest lie that most leaders tell themselves about accountability?
Well, I don't think I've ever been asked that before. The biggest lie they tell themselves. Yeah, here's what it is. It's, I'm going to demonstrate grace. And I'm going to demonstrate grace to you, whoever, by letting you off the hook because you're only human. And they think they're doing that person a favor. And to your point, and something I mentioned earlier, you're actually not. As I said, you only hold people accountable that you think are capable. And so when you fail to hold somebody accountable, what you're really saying is you're not capable. So the moving company got sold, and the new owner, we had a conversation because there was a couple of movers who were making terrible mistakes, costing us money on claims. It was terrible. And they had passed the threshold of, and when I was in charge, right? So I was now the GM, but I answered to this new boss. When it was completely up to me, they passed the threshold. They had enough conversations of counseling where to get them to do better. It was time to let him go. And he said, no, I want to practice grace. And when I asked him, he didn't have a good answer for, but, I was still overridden, was, well, what about grace to the other people
right,
who have to clean up the mistake? Or grace to the customer, we call them shippers in the moving business, whose furniture got damaged or possessions got broken or missing or whatever it was, right? What about grace to them? How long do we give them, these two individuals, to get better? And at what cost to everybody else, right? So it's not a one-sided thing. And I think that's the biggest lie. That, or it's people who are really good in one area, but really bad in other areas. And usually it's what I see is behavior, like they're really good technicians and they're so caustic and cancerous to the culture and their attitudes, but they're willing to put up with it because they're producers, they tell themselves.
Right.
And nobody sees how they're damaging everybody else.
Yeah, they're toxic to the organization, but because they're producers, right? Exactly. And that's, I mean, you find that everywhere. You find that in large business, small business and stuff. And, that's where radical responsibility on behalf of the leader has to come about, right? So yeah, those are both great. I love the first point because I probably won't phrase it exactly right, but basically, if you're not holding them accountable, you don't think they're capable. And again, if you don't think they're capable, then, why are you continuing the definition of insanity, right? So I think that's a really great point. You're better off letting them move to something else that they are better suited for, right?
And this is important because they're better off. So we're talking about
That's
mindset.
right. Yeah.
If we think
exactly.
about them, they're not happy. Nobody's happy underperforming. And they're keeping the job because it's a job and it's putting food on their table. Well, we have a responsibility to make sure everybody rises to their top, highest, best form of self. And the individuals who are not performing don't have that opportunity in your organization. Give them that opportunity.
No, that's a great, it's a great point around it. Something that you said, it kind of alluded to in the beginning, but I've seen it just in some of the prep. Motivation wears off, but inspiration lasts. Explain what that means.
Yeah. So motivation, I've defined motivation as external, whereas inspiration is internal. When I was in college, I used to go rent horses outside. Grew up in Philadelphia, and in Bucks County, just outside of Philadelphia, there's a giant state park called Tyler State Park. And just outside of the park grounds, there's a rental stables. You can rent horses. And I didn't know how to ride, but I always thought it was cool, grew up watching cowboy movies. And me and a buddy of mine, we'd go every, couple of weeks and rent horses. And at first, the horses I would get, they're mostly nags. They don't want to leave the stables. And you had to drag them out of sight of the barns, and you get on them and you have to give them the heel to get them to even walk. And that's motivation, right? You have to I have to give them the heel or hold a carrot in front of their nose. The moment that motivation disappears, they stop performing. And we've all seen people, you get a bonus, they work hard for that bonus, but as soon as that bonus goes away, you know what? Go back to, half throttle, okay? Doing enough to not get fired. One day I rented a horse named Skittles, and Skittles was just a fireball of energy. Now, Skittles had no problem moving. I had problems guiding him. He had no problem moving. He'd back me into bushes. He'd roll over on me. He'd go running real fast to try and lose me. And slowly but surely, I had to learn to ride Skittles. So Skittles was inspired to move. He needed no external motivation to move. I had to learn to guide him where I wanted to go. When you have employees, team members who are inspired, they want to get the job done. Right. So this is where that mindset's so important. Why do you exist as a company? When you have people who are excited by your mission and your purpose, they'll want to get the job done. Now our job as leaders is simply to learn to guide them to do it in the way that we envision and that we want to. That doesn't mean we don't enlist their vision as well, as to your point earlier, but we overall have that responsibility for the direction of the ship. And we want to make sure we're all, to be trite, pulling our oars in the same direction. Because otherwise they're pulling the oars real hard, but they counter to everybody else. We all want to make sure we're in alignment. And so inspiring people by talking about why the company exists, the ripple effect that you mentioned earlier, how what we do affects others and how that affects others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. That's where the inspiration comes from.
Yeah. I think that's a great distinction too. And I think, like motivation, I've always said motivation honestly comes within, right? Like there's the short-term motivation, like if you, watch a video or would see a speaker or whatever, but true motivation, which leads to, really, consistent inspiration, has to come from within. Nobody can keep you motivated, but really yourself in the end. And part of that's having that purpose, that cause, that passion, that direction that you want to head in, right? To something greater than yourself or than, for yourself. And so it's, like when you interview, that's some of the things you're looking for in people, right? Because sadly, there's some people that just don't have it and they're not going to have it, right? And those are like some of the ones that, like you mentioned, like on the team that just like they end up getting onto a team or they end up getting hired somewhere and they don't have it. They're never going to have it. They don't want to have it, right? And so then, they end up kind of being toxic, right? So I think it's, just kind of taken from that. It's thinking even to like when you're hiring people or putting people in a role, right? Do they have that fire, on their own, right? I think that's a key component. And that kind of reminded me of that. We talked some about your military, time that, and everything else. And obviously radical accountability, stems from that, the manual, that sort of thing. Are there any other lessons that you took from your time as a military leader that you feel have really helped your success as an entrepreneur?
Well, everything we've talked about, frankly, came from that. When we were at sea for 111 days, that's a rough time. Now, the average age of a sailor on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier is 19 years old. And the flight deck crew, many of the other shops, the engine room and all the things below decks, they run multiple shifts, just like in a factory. We'd call it port and starboard, blue and gold, so because you're running operations 24/7. Even if you're not flying 24/7, the ship has to operate 24/7. The guys on the flight deck, though, there was one shift and they went for flight ups. And in the beginning, we were doing 24-hour flight ups. For first couple of weeks of Desert Shield, we didn't know if Iran was going to attack us. We were at a wartime footing and nobody knew what was going to happen. But even when we were in 24-hour flight ops, we'd typically be flying 18 hours a day. So imagine working 18-hour work days, knowing that, every day is a Monday. It's Groundhog Day over and over and over again. And how do you keep people going under those conditions? Well, you do it by talking about all the things we mentioned earlier. We had problems. I remember once we lost an engine. I don't mean it fell off the airplane. It stopped functioning. So now we're single engine. We can't land on land any place. We were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean at this time. We're called blue water ops, which meant the guys on the flight deck had to relocate all the aircraft that were on the landing area because we weren't configured for landing at that time. So we could get our butts down quickly before something really, really bad happened. 19-year-old kids, they know if they don't do their job right, let's say they bang two aircraft together and now they fouled the flight deck, that lives are literally at stake. So I was putting my life in the hand of a 19-year-old kid, and they executed flawlessly because they understood what was at stake. So that's where that came from. The other thing was, get out there with your troops. One of the branches I was responsible for was called the final checkers. So as the aircraft takes a catapult, these are senior enlisted personnel whose job is to give the final look through safety check of the aircraft. Is everything okay? If you watch videos, there are guys in the white. They give the final thumbs up just before the aircraft launches. And I was their division officer, assistant division officer. And I remember going out with them and saying, hey, show me what you do. And I got out there with them. And I got to tell you, even though I had time on the flight deck, manning aircraft and flying, now I'm sitting there right next to the engines as they're running up to full military power and huge flames are coming out the back, feet away from it, realizing how dangerous this job is. And they so appreciated the fact that I was interested in what they had to do. I've maintained in my career, in fact, I've rarely actually knew how to do the job of the people I was managing. Almost never in my career. People say, you have to do the job before you can manage them. Bull. It's two totally different skill sets. But you do need to be able to appreciate what they do and how they do it. Get your tail out there, get on the shop floor, have them show you how to work the lathe or the press, right? Or I don't know if you could have people show you how to code, but do something so at least you have an appreciation for their skill set. That will go 1,000 miles.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I've always said that no matter how big your business gets, if you don't keep a pulse to the ground floor, you're missing massive opportunity and not doing your job as a leader for the business. Because I've seen so many businesses that get the leader or the CEO gets separated by multiple levels of management and so on and everything, and they don't have a clue what's really happening on the ground, and they're making decisions from 5,000 feet up, and it's like it's making things worse than it is better. And so having at least a pulse, it doesn't mean you have to be in the day to day of everything for everybody, but checking in a few times a month and just getting a pulse of what's happening for the sales team and the support team and what they're running into, and understanding that, and then looking at your ops team and what their biggest challenges they're working on, and really understanding how they're approaching that. Like, just having that idea of kind of what's happening like that is so critical to I think being effective. So I think that's a really great point. My last question for you before you get to Misfit 3 is you've got multiple disciplines of martial arts, black belts. My daughter's a second degree black belt in Taekwondo, so I know what it takes to get there and do all the things that have to be done. And one of the things that I've noticed about it is not just the discipline; it's the what you have to do consistently to get there, but it's the mental resilience that you have to have. So talk a little bit about what you've learned about mental resilience from just I guess all your experience, but maybe potentially from martial arts as well.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. When you test for your black belt at many schools, and not all, unfortunately, but certainly the schools I went to, it's at that point, it's not a test of your skill set. Your skill set's proven. Your physical skill set is a test of your resilience. Black belt is a mental state as much as anything. It's about the ability to keep going beyond what you perceive your physical limits are. We had to do 10 fights against black belts. So our first fight was against another candidate. It was sort of a warm-up fight. Then we had 10 fights, different disciplines, ground, kickboxing, boxing, Western boxing, didn't matter. But we tend to, and you're dead at this point. For us, this was, we had a physical test the day before, running, push-ups, sit-ups, all those several-hour physical tests, all the lipogen strain from your body. And then the next day you have a 3-hour martial arts test going through the entire, everything in the system that culminates at the end with 10 rounds of fighting. At that point, you could barely raise your arms. Or at least you think you can barely raise your arms. The reality is you can. You just have to fight through it. And that's where the resilience comes from. It's the same thing I learned, though, going through SEER school, survival, evasion, resistance, escape. They push you to the same limits, going through officer candidate school. And that's we could do more than we could. It's the 6 inches between the ears. That's what keeps us either going or not. If you ask for a second wind, if you just say, I'm not going to give up, your body will find a way to make it happen. You've got more in the tank than you think. Don't listen to the pain. The Marines say pain is just weakness leaving the body. Sure statements have never been said, right? All it is. So enjoy it. At the end, you'll feel the highest highs I've ever had. And I confess to being a druggie in my younger days. I don't mean like heroin, that sort of thing, but I'm a child of the 70s, right? I did a lot of things that I would never do today. I learned those lessons. The best highs I've ever had came at the end of an incredible physical exertion.
Yeah, I can't agree more, but we didn't talk about this, but, audience knows I compete pretty heavily in Ironman, and, gotten to a point where, world championships every year, and, ranked pretty high. It was ranked top 100 in the US this last year in my age group and stuff. And, people ask me about it all the time, and every race has a time or a moment, even it's not about finishing, but every race I'm competing against my last time that I did, or, whatever it is that, I want to obviously do better. And so you continue to push yourself at an extremely high level, and every race, there's a time where my mind says, slow down, you can't keep going like this, or, you got to stop. You're going to pass out, or, you can't keep this cadence up or whatever it is. And it is in those moments where you have to take control with your mind and you tell your body that that's not true and this is true, and keep moving forward and pushing harder. And I love those moments because that when I break through those is when I kind of get that same feeling you're talking about, but also that's when I grow the most. It helps me as a leader. It helps me just physically, helps me with all that stuff. But I can really relate and understand, what you're saying there. I think a lot of the audience can too. That's a great way to end it before we get to your Misfit 3. So we're going to do it. We're going to take just one more 1-minute break. We'll come right back with Dave's Misfit 3.
Before we get into today's Misfit 3, I want to take a minute to talk to you about a free resource available to you from the Misfit Entrepreneur, the Misfit Minute. The Misfit Minute is the free weekly resource packed with useful tips, tricks, and information from the world of Misfit entrepreneurs. It not only includes further resources on the week's Misfit Entrepreneur guest, but additional links, articles, and resources to help you be more successful. It's delivered every Friday to your inbox. To sign up, all you have to do is go to the homepage at www.misfitentrepreneur.com and you will see the Misfit Minute sign-up page. Don't miss out on this great resource and all it has to help you. Sign up today and look for it this Friday.
Okay, it's time for Dave's Misfit 3. These are the 3 things that he wants you to take that you can put in your life, your business, make a difference for yourself starting today. And the way that I always frame this to every guest that comes on the show is I say, hey, look, if you're going to leave this earth tomorrow and you could only leave behind your best 3 pieces of wisdom for the generations that come after you to help them live their best life, what would those 3 things be? So, Dave, what are your Misfit 3?
Number 1, nothing happens to us. Everything happens for us. My coach likes to say, and what I've learned is that everything that happens exactly perfectly. There are no mistakes, there are no accidents. If it didn't work out, the result may not be what we're looking for. It may not be what we wanted, but it's absolutely what we needed. Learn from that, grow from that. Okay, it's a lesson. It's going to come up again. So we need to learn from it so that when it comes up again, we can just do it, right? Just like any other lesson. The first time you fail, you might fail the test, but the second time the test comes up, you're like, oh, I know these answers, and you just do it. That's how we grow. Change your mindset. Everything happened for us. Figure out how come it happened and what the lesson is. Number 1. Number 2, if everything happens for us, nothing is bad, then there are no bad decisions. Every decision we make, irrespective of how the result ends up, was a good decision. If there are no bad decisions, how do we know what to do when we're faced with a decision? Follow your heart. Which way is your heart telling you to go? Not your brain, your heart. When we follow our heart, we're going to be passionate about what we do. We're going to end up with better results. So that's number 2. And number 3, the limitations you perceive, and this is what we just talked about, the limitations you perceive are nothing more than the limitations you've set on yourself. We are limitless. There is nothing each and every one of us can't do if we truly want to. It may take longer than we want. It may happen quicker than we expect. But we can get it done if we truly want to do it.
No, I love all those, and they're so true for all areas of life. Those first 2 go together, and it is so important. You probably know this, but maybe a lot of you don't watch it or don't know watching. Your chances of being born are 1 in 4 trillion. So, just by the way, that's like the entire population of San Diego, all each getting a trillion-sided dice and all rolling at the same time and coming up with the same number. So like that's your chance of being alive, right? So like literally one soldier steps on a wrong way on a battlefield throughout history, you're not here, And so like everything that has happened to bring all of you watching to this moment where you're watching, we're at the end of this show now, watching this, had to happen exactly as it did to get you there. And I think people like just ponder that a little bit, because just the fact that you're even alive is amazing. Think about all the other things, the chances that have happened in your life, good, even bad, but the chances of it happening, the chance of you getting to this point. So you're here for a reason. And it's really important that you make sure to maximize your possibilities for yourself, because for you to be here, so many others never existed, you know?
Dave,
Um,
Dave,
so,
Dave, if I could
yeah,
just add to that, right? More than just amazing, the chance that any one of us here is a miracle, which means
yeah,
each and every one
yep,
of us, every one of you listening, you are a miracle.
yeah. In the truest sense of the word. If people do want to learn more about you, where should they go?
Yeah, go to my website, lockedonleadership.com, LOCKEDON leadership.com, and check it out. There's, if you sign up for my newsletter, I've got some resources that make available to you. Frankly, if you decide to get the resources and unsubscribe, I'm good with that. If it helps you, that's fine. If you're not interested in whatever I'm saying, that's okay. I take no umbrage at that. But what I have for you is my white paper on radical accountability. So if you want to learn more, discover more about what's involved with that, there is access to a leadership self-assessment. It's a 10-question self-assessment, tell you where you are in your leadership scale. If you wanted to buy my book, there's a link there to that. And if you want to just have a complimentary debrief with me about whatever leadership challenges you have, you can schedule it right there. So lockedonleadership.com, scroll to the bottom, sign up for my newsletter.
Excellent. We'll link to that in the show notes, the best show notes in the business, for reasons I'll talk about more in a second. First, for those of you that are new to the Misfit Entrepreneur, it's your first episode with us. Welcome. It is such an honor to have you with us. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I hope you became a regular listener and subscriber. For those of you that are with us week in and week out, I cannot thank you enough for your support of the show. You are what makes this go in over 100 countries every single week. So thank you for your support. And make sure to go out and check out the show notes of this episode. They are the best in the business. Why? Because I do them myself. Actually, as part of my, personal growth and habit routine, every single week I go back through these episodes and I take my best pieces of wisdom and insights and, actions and things from great guests like Dave, and I share those with you. So check those out. And then go out, give this episode a rating and review. Like, comment on it, help share Dave's message. Because I say this in every episode, one great episode can change someone's life. Maybe something that Dave shared today was that missing link you were looking for to get to your next level. So share this with others. And again, Dave, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all your wisdom and insight today.
Well, Dave, thanks for having me. I had a great time.